Today we have Imani Ellis joining us. Thank you, Imani. So for our second fireside chat, this series is called Gaining Insight, Black Execs Making a Seat at the Table. My name is Naija Rudolph, and I am the founder of Network While Black, a community I created to both inspire and educate women of color on the importance of networking and the power of proximity. These chats that we're doing for the month of February and March is to give our audience insight into what it's like being a Black woman in corporate America and paving your own way. So today we have Imani Ellis, who is the founder and CEO of CultureCon and the Creative Collective. The Creative Collective started in Imani's one-bedroom apartment as a means to foster meaningful connection and is now the leading destination for diverse creativity and connection. Their marquee event, CultureCon, is the largest celebrating Black and Brown creatives is the largest conference celebrating Black and Brown creatives and their undeniable impact on culture, which we're all going to get into in a minute. So welcome, Imani. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. The first question I love to ask our guests is, how instrumental has networking been in your career?
Oh, wow. Networking is, I would say, 50% of everything. I think a lot of it does start with you and your vision and your work ethic, but without community and networking, you're kind of just like in a vacuum. So very, very instrumental. I remember when I first came to New York, I knew no one. My parents are both pastors, so I had no connections in this city. I came as an intern, but I learned very quickly that I could learn from other people. And I know we'll get into the details, but I absolutely networked intentionally, and was able to grow in my career because of it.
I love that. And I love how you said network intentionally, because that was actually the theme of our first event.
Oh, oh, yes.
Yes. So you started the Creative Collective in your one-bedroom apartment, and now it's grown to over 100,000 members. Can you tell us, like, what sparked your inspiration to initially start the Creative Collective?
Yeah, so I was a publicist at NBC Universal and I loved my job. I did crisis PR and brand and personal PR. So a lot of red carpets, a lot of television shows, a lot of talking to reporters. But what I realized was I didn't have like a functioning community, a place where I could go and say, hey, what's the rate for this? Or does anyone know anyone who does that? Or just a group of people that we could use each other to build something bigger than ourselves. It felt very isolated, which I thought was ironic because New York City has more people than anywhere in the United States. And so I thought, what better way than to network and build community with people that I'm already inspired by and interacting with. And so there was a booker at Good Morning America, an incredible guy, Eric Jones, who I talked to for work, but I was like, I'm really inspired by him. I'm going to invite him. One of my other great friends was an actor. And so I invited 10 of my friends slash people that inspired me to my apartment. And the only rule was that they had to each bring one person that they could vouch for. So it was 20 people. And we went around in a circle. And the prompt was, what are you working on? And it could be work. It could be getting out of a bad relationship. It could be anything. And I think we realized that we hadn't ever been in a space like that where people were being so vulnerable with kind of complete strangers.
Mhm.
And so that's how we started, and we kept growing until we could no longer fit in my living room. And I kept my job at NBC for 10 years while I built Creative Collective. And so I absolutely think that they kind of fueled each other, because as I was learning in my 9 to 5, I was also learning how to be a leader, with my own company.
Wow. Do you find it easier to network across with people that you don't know? So for instance, how you said that you guys were very transparent when it came to, just meeting strangers and talking about like what you're working on and, if you got out of a bad relationship. Do you think you would have been able to do it with, close with people that you were closer to, or do you find it easier that you guys didn't really know each other?
That's a good question. I think a lot of us have to reframe like networking, because there are levels to vulnerability. Like being vulnerable with your mom might look different than being vulnerable with your mentor. So I think there's levels to it. And I think you have to be careful with like labels, right? So like everyone you meet, the second you meet them, you're not friends, right? Like you're acquaintances first. And so I think a lot of the language that we use is super important. But for me, like one, I'm an introvert. So like even though I know there's 23 people on this call, it feels like it's me and you. And so I thrive in very like it's just us situations. And so I wanted to create a space where people could feel brave to tell the truth, because a lot of the events I was going to, it was like, hi, I'm Imani, I work at NBC. Hi, I'm Imani, I work. It was just like, what do I do with that? And so, when I network, I like to start with things that are so separate from your career. Like I like to get curious about like exactly, we're both from Gwinnett. We
Mhm.
both can talk about North Side. Now we've got a human connection.
I
Now
agree.
I can layer on that what we do for work, but I would never start with like, so what do you do? Because now already we're facilitating this transactional relationship. And don't get me wrong, some relationships in work are transactional, but just understand that there's like a expiration date. You can only go so far being like, what do you do? What do you do? It's not really going to sustain you. So I think to answer your question, I'm someone who I could talk to someone on the airplane if I'm in the right
Yeah.
mood. But I'm definitely going to be a little bit more vulnerable to people that I, have carved out that safe space for.
All right, I agree. We're kind of the same because I'm an introvert too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, but when it comes to one-on-one connections, I'm cool. When it comes to like group connections, I will sit there and observe before I like really get into it. So,
Totally. Like, yeah, like I like to read the room. I like to, yeah, like I don't need to be the center. I like to observe and say something when I actually have something to say versus just,
talking just to talk.
talking. Yeah,
I
that's nice.
agree,
Yeah.
agree 100%. Let's talk about CultureCon. That is
Okay.
a huge event. You created it in 2017 as a homecoming for creatives of color. What was your initial vision behind creating CultureCon, and has that vision changed over the years?
Listen, I was a little delulu. And I love it. I love it. Like I grew up watching a lot of Disney. My parents really said, like, if you work hard, you can do it. And I had no idea what went into throwing a conference. I had thrown events before, and I really was driven to create CultureCon because I was angry. And why I was angry was I wanted to network. I had just gotten to New York City. I wanted to build community. I went online for where do you go to network? And I went to all these different events, and they just were not built for us. Again, this was 2017. It wasn't that trendy yet
Okay.
to have these spaces. And so I was trying to join other existing spaces, and they just like were not catered for Black people, to be honest. And so I remember going to one event and asking, oh, like, do you all, looks like you rent out events. Like, if I wanted to do an event here, what would be the process? And he was like, well, who would your event be for? And I was like, Black creatives. And he was like, why do you need a separate event for Black creatives? And I remember being like, I
That's
didn't have the language at the time, but I was really, really pissed that I had to justify why, when I'm in all these spaces, no one asked about my experience, but now I want an experience and it's all of these questions. And so I was pissed. And whenever someone tells me I can't do something, there's a little part of me that's like, okay. And so I said to my friends, I think we should throw a conference our way from the ground up, things that we want to talk about, and invite our community to show up and just love on them. And my friends, again, they had never thrown a conference, but they were like, and so we scratched it together. We were down at the Samsung 837 building. We had 200 people. Spike Lee was our keynote speaker, which at the time I'm like, I stayed up till 2 in the morning spray painting Spike Lee letters. I almost passed out in my apartment because of the fumes, but it was beautiful. And it was everyone came, and we were sold out, and we looked at the waiting list, and there were over 500 people on the waiting list. And that's when I knew I wasn't crazy. It wasn't in my head that like there were people like me who were like, where are the Black and brown creatives? Like, this is New York City. And all we needed was a place where we could be together. And my team and my friends and we started to create that place and then just got out of the way so that the magic could happen.
I absolutely love that, especially the part of being Delulu, because that's kind of how I started Network While Black. Like I literally started over Thanksgiving because I was in Gwinnett for 2 weeks and I have nothing to do. And I've been going to networking events and I realized like, because I'm a stylist and I've been getting invited to these events, but it's only maybe like, a handful of Black people, Black women there. And I'm like, damn, where are all the Black people at? Like, where are we? These events are free. I'm getting invited. Where everybody else at? And then when I did see Black people there, I'm in the corner talking to them about like fellowships and different resources that I had. And I didn't realize that, okay, not everybody has these resources. Not everybody knows where to go. So that's basically how Network While Black started. We
Yeah.
had our first event last month. I've never thrown an event a day in my life. I've never talked to sponsors or anything. And I'm so happy that I did it because I didn't give myself the chance to talk myself out of it. Like I didn't know how much it took to, organize an event or, how to talk to sponsors. I got on threads and asked them and they were like, "Oh, you should have did that in October." I'm like, "All right, I didn't have that idea in October. It's December. I need somebody to get these goodie bags together." You know
Oh,
what I
yeah.
mean? So, and I reached out to all Black women businesses and shout out to my Black women, okay? Shout out to
Listen,
us because they
absolutely.
true.
And congrats to you because
You.
I wasn't able to attend, but I saw it all over social. Nana's a great friend of mine, and like it looked incredible. And listen, you need a little bit of Delulu to do anything. You got to match it with the execution, otherwise you end up, just like being delirious.
Yeah.
But you need a little bit of why not? If I could have told, 25-year-old Imani all the things that were coming, I
Mhm.
don't know if she could have handled that all at once, right? We need it step by step because it was a 200 person event and I thought I'm going to pass out. This is crazy. I couldn't have told her that she was going to do a 10,000 person event. Like she wasn't ready just yet for that version. And so to your point, you got to start before you can talk yourself out of it because I just finished reading this book called The War of Art, and Stephen Pressfield talks about resistance and how we feel this calling on our lives. And what comes next to protect ourselves is resistance, which is don't do it. You can't do it. Why would you do it? No one's going to care. And it's to keep us safe. But what we don't realize is sometimes it's going to keep us small. And so anyone who is looking to get out of their head, I really strongly suggest reading The War of Art. I read it, I'm sorry. Yeah, The War of Art. I read it once a year just to get out of my head because every level is going to require a different version of you. So the version of you that got you here, you might have to get a little bit braver to get to the next version of you. And so that can be a little uncomfortable.
The War of Art. Okay, come
Oh,
on. Good
yes.
recommendations.
It's life changing.
So you said you're the daughter of two preachers.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you, do you think your love for cultivating community came from your parents?
Definitely part of it for sure. We're a very big, like family oriented, like growing up, we all sat at our places at the table. This is like my seat. I have two little sisters and a brother. And my mom and dad really prioritized like relationships and like prioritizing, like, you don't always have to like each other, but we're always going to
Mhm.
love each other and just respect. And I think I realized just how important you people are. And I know there's so much and like I can do bad by myself. I'm going to work for myself so I don't have to deal with people. But no matter what you do, you have to deal with people. Even as a business owner, you're in service to your team. You're in service to your clients. You're in service to your community. And so I always knew that people were going to be the way that I maneuvered through the world. And I'm also just very curious about people. So my parents, they took us to a lot of museums growing up. We would be driving home. There'd be a homeless person on the side of the road. My mom would pull over. And I remember being 6 years old, being like, Mom, like, can we just go home? Like I was 6, but they just have a heart for the people. And now looking back, I see that they absolutely practiced what they preached,
Mhm.
which was just love for people. And I think that's definitely like a huge impact of like just my love for bringing people together um and having us love on each other, especially Black people. Like we have to put on so much armor to go into the world. And like I was in corporate for 10 years. I went from being an intern, and we can talk about it. I went from being an intern to a vice president. There was a lot of
Mhm.
that I had to navigate and learn in that environment. And luckily I had great a great boss who was my anchor. But I think as Black people and Black women, we have to give ourselves so much credit for how many times in our lives we're holding our breath because we're holding it all together. It is exhausting. And CultureCon and Creative Collective, we were just like, show up without your title, without your press-ons, just be yourself, because it's a lot of work out here.
I love that. I love that message behind it. Like, I'm all about cultivating community. I want us to all come together. It's room for all of us at the top. We don't
Yeah,
just have to be the only.
no, it's listen, that was a mentality that was put into our community for a reason. The discord, it is not natural. We come from tribes that worked together, and I think we're all starting to recognize like what serves us and what doesn't serve us, and being the only and being the first is no longer, that's not the benchmark. We
Mhm.
need to crack the door open so that it doesn't become walking into an event like you just said and it's like, why are there no other Black people? Like that's not the norm. That's not okay.
I agree. So, I was told I went to a panel maybe a few months ago, and Danessa Myricks, the makeup founder, she said that as an entrepreneur, it's not a badge of honor to do everything by yourself. So you grew the creative collective in your apartment. It went from 20 people, it's now 100,000 people. You manage a full team for CultureCon. Let me ask you, since your company is your baby, so how are you able to find the right team, find the right people to hire, and actually let them do their job? You know what I mean? Like, how are you able to let go and just like, all right, listen, I'm the CEO, but I need somebody else to do this and this. How are you able to do that?
Oh, I love this question because it was the lesson that took me the longest to learn. I think it starts with being honest with yourself. So I really try to not lie to myself,
Mhm.
meaning I want to be honest about the things that I am very good at and the things that I'm not so good at. In the beginning, you're doing it all because it's just a vision inside of your head. It doesn't exist yet. And so I think it's always important to know how to do it all, even if you're not the best at it, so that you can delegate it. Because I think oftentimes as founders, sometimes we want to bring people on so quickly, but we haven't figured out what direction they need to go in. So they're set up to fail because they don't know what you want and you don't really know what you want. And so in the beginning, I realized I'm really good at the big picture. I can see it before it's real. I can put the action plan. These are the key dates we need to hit. I can see all the moving pieces, the marketing, the finance, the production. But when I get into the nitty gritty of it, I really don't want to talk about electricity voltage at the greenhouse for like, there are things that it's like, I don't really, it's not my love language. And so if you know that the production piece isn't your love language, still sit in on those meetings, still be very involved so that you can learn. But learn how to delegate. And then in terms of like, your baby, I think it gets to a point where in the beginning, a business, it is your baby and you should keep it very close. Not too many people, just like a newborn, not too many people need to be around the baby because you're still forming the vision and what you want it to be. But as it becomes a toddler, It might need to go to Uncle Michael's house sometime. It might need to go to Auntie Aisha's house sometimes, because if you don't allow it to grow and it's always your baby, you're actually going to hurt your business. Because one thing about growing businesses, you have to be open to feedback. You have to be open to pivoting. And if you're like, no, we must never change, you might get left behind. And so there were times where in the beginning, a lot of CultureCon was like Imani's view of CultureCon. But as the team came, they were able to offer diverse perspective. Like, Imani, we're kind of skewing kind of like female heavy. Like, you need a little bit more representation. Or Imani, when you talk about the Black experience, you're from the South Black experience. There's the New York Black experience. There's the Caribbean Black experience. There, and so you need those diverse point of views. Otherwise, you're going to become a little bit, it's the Imani show. So it's a little bit like a baby, but the baby has to grow, and what you can do is create guardrails. So I never completely throw something to someone. I'm like, okay, good luck.
Mhm.
I have very clear expectations of what a win looks like in the role, so that we can come back and say, did we succeed at the role? So if I'm bringing on a social media person, I'm not just like, run my social media accounts. Okay, that means a lot of different things. It's like, my goal is that I want to grow our social media accounts by 15,000 people by the end of the year. Can you create a strategy to show me how you're going to do that? They create a strategy. I look at it. The baby's in good hands. I hand over the toddler. We have weekly check-ins, but that's how you can start to like relinquish control a little bit. Because there is no badge of honor. I told my mom this all the time. There's no badge of honor for getting to the end of your life and being like, I never needed help. No one is going to applaud you for like working yourself to death. So you might as well delegate so that you can live long, live happy, and not be consumed by something that you used to love.
Mm. Okay. You know what? That no,
I might know from experience. I had to let go of some things, okay? It was tough.
you just hit the nail on the head for me because you said delegate, delegate, delegate. Now, I want to ask you, do you consider yourself a more creative person or a business person?
I think I think I'm equally right brain and left brain. And what I've realized is a lot of people over index in one or the other, but I really consider myself creative. Ever since I was little, I was doing creative things. But I also think that business is very cool. And I think economics is very cool. And I like to see how the stock market affects if my clients have budget for CultureCon. Like, it's all connected. And I think it's been by design that people have made business and stock and all these things very unsexy so that we are not interested in it. But I think the more you kind of think about it, it's all art. Like, when I hear lawyers speak and I watch like Suits and I see the way that they're using language, I'm like, that's creative.
Okay.
Like, when my accountant is telling me, okay, if you move this here and if you move that there, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do your job, but that's creative. And so I have forced myself to kind of look in the corner of the things that I used to think were boring, because I realized that's how you go out of business. When you're like, let's just focus on the logo. It's like, no, you need to know how much money a month is coming in and out of your accounts. Like, that to me is creative, because you might realize I got to get scrappy this month. And if I just don't look at it, I might be out of business.
So me, I'm the opposite. I'm a creative and I didn't want anything to do with the business. Like I was just telling my agent, negotiate, do what you have to do. And then I realized, sis, you need to understand what money is coming in, like what's going on. Even if you don't care about, the accounting and the logistics, at least try to learn. Okay. At least try, because at the end of the day, it's still you are the brand. And
Yeah.
nobody is going to take care of you like you. So even though, yes, I'm the creative. All right, let me take some business classes. Let me see, because it'll work out in the long run. You won't just be
Yeah.
sitting shocked if you don't
And
have.
what you all can do, because I like to leave people with like actionable resources, is there's this website called Score mentor.com, I believe, or .org. Y'all, there are executives, retired executives who offer up their free mentor services on this website, and they are all over the world. My mentor, Mr. Bob, 65-year-old white man, used to run these like Fortune 500 companies. We meet once a month, and it's my accountability. That's how I started liking business, because we meet once a month, and he was like, okay, what's your P&L? I'm like, who cares? CultureCon is coming. He was like, no, what's your P&L? And he really got me thinking about, to your point, what's the money coming in and what's the money coming out? Like, these are basic things that every business owner needs to know. And like you said, even if it starts with, I'm just going to create an Excel, I'm going to get a QuickBooks basic account, $10. I'm gonna put all my invoices in QuickBooks, because maybe last year, if my personal brand brought in $10,000, next year I want to bring in $15,000. And the only way to compare that is to start recording it, because what'll happen as you scale and you have people under you, nobody's gonna, the money's real to you because you've seen it start at zero.
Mhm.
When you start having employees and it's bigger and it's bigger and it's bigger, and you have no idea how to track the money, it becomes very stressful, because now you don't have systems in place. And when your taxes come around, you don't know how the business performed. You don't know if you did better this year or better last year. So yeah, scorementor.org. It's amazing. And
Right.
it's free.
And we love free. I know I do.
I know I do.
So let me ask you, let's just switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about knowing your worth. All right. You started CultureCon, you started Creative Collective. How can you take a great idea in your head and actually make it profitable?
That's a great question. I think the secret is to actually not start with profitability. I think it's to figure out three things, which is, what are you very good at and you enjoy? Is there a market need for it? And are you the one to fill the need? And the reason why that's important is, like I said, I did PR for 10 years. I was very good at it. I got New York Times, I got Good Morning America, any press that you can get, I got. And it would have been easy for me to say, I'm just going to start a PR firm. But it was not my passion. I was just good at it. And so if I were to have gone out on my own and started a PR firm, I probably would have only had it for like a year. That's not like my calling. But what I'm really good at and I like are bringing people together. And so that's why I was like, I got to do community. And so I'm good at it, and I enjoy it. And then the third part is, was there a need for it? And when I looked around, it was like, where are all, like you just said, where are the Black people? And I saw this huge gap. I couldn't believe it. When I went to trademark the Creative Collective, I couldn't believe it wasn't trademarked. That is the simplest name I'd ever heard. But my sister said, when you go down the bread aisle, and there's all the different brands of bread, it doesn't stop you to going to the brand that you like. So don't be intimidated if you're like, but other people have a makeup company, right? It's like, why is yours different? Once you figure out that, if there's a need, you're good at it and you enjoy it, it's like the momentum will start, because you'll realize you're not the only person who needs it. So if I had gone into Creative Collective with like, how are we going to make money? I don't know. It probably would have felt that way. I probably would have been like, membership dues and give me your money. People would have been like, okay. But I was generous with it because I just was like, we deserve this. So our events were free. I was, like you just said, calling up sponsors. And I think that was a big part of our ethos. But money is important. So what I ended up doing was, for the first CultureCon, we had to pay for it. My goal was not to make money. It was not to lose money. So I created a budget of everything we needed. We needed a venue, we needed speakers, we needed food, we needed help. And I literally said, how could I get all of these things for free? Because then at least I'm not losing money, I'm not spending money. And that to me was a win, because I could take this hopefully successful event in a recap deck, and next year I could pitch it and get money for it. And so that's exactly what we did. The first year we got the venue for free because we said we'd post about them on Instagram. We got the liquor for free. We got the food donated. Spike Lee came for free. Everyone just cared for free. And then the next year, and I do think we charged tickets. I think they were $25 tickets. That might have been the only profit, but even that went towards like the chips, you know what I mean? But the whole point was that I didn't have to dip into my bank account. And then after that, once you kind of have built momentum and you've built community, then you can start charging and then become profitable.
I truly believe when you pour into others, they pour back into you. Like because you were doing it for the community and you wanted to bring people together, it was like, all right, yeah, let's help. All right, what can I do? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I truly believe that when you pour into others, they will pour right back into you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And people know the difference, right? Like I think you come, and again, it's different for every business model, right? Like this is a community-based business. I'm not saying if you come out with a line of lipstick, you're giving it all away for free, right? You've got to figure out what works for you and spend some time in discovery. Like I think sometimes we go straight from having an idea to announcing the idea. I think that's a mistake. I think you need to spend some time. I like to call it discovery. Discovery is just before you get too emotionally attached to this idea. Does it already exist? Are they already doing it pretty well? Have they already capitalized the market? I wouldn't go out and make uh, tissues because Kleenex is already so over that market. It's probably not worth the uphill battle. So you do want to spend some time with discovery, not to get discouraged, but just to be realistic with what you're bringing into the world. And then by the time it's come into the world, you've really, like I said, like a baby, you've like nurtured it a little bit.
Hmm, I agree. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, Imani, you told Glamour magazine that the best career advice I've ever received is that as hard as you work, you also need to advocate for yourself. Can you
Yes.
give our audience advice on how to advocate for themselves in a corporate setting?
Yes. I mean, I guess, do you mean like in general or promotion or
We want to know promotion. We want to know how can we negotiate. You were a VP, so we want.
let's talk about it. Okay, listen, y'all. I'm gonna tell you guys everything I learned. The first thing is you gotta, like I said, do not lie to yourself. I know that you guys are like, what do you mean? But I think there's a lot of discourse on the internet right now that's just like, you should get a promotion because you deserve it. And it's like, that's not really the how it works, right? It, there are causes and there's a cause and effect is what I really mean. And what I mean by that is anywhere I went in, I was working really hard. I think a lot of times, like, again, we just have to be realistic with what we're bringing to the table. And are we really giving it our all? That does not mean you taken advantage of. That does not mean have your boundaries crossed. But like, are you doing the bare minimum and being like, okay, it's been a year, promote me? Or are you actively contributing? And only you know the answer to that. And what I would do when I went in was whenever I thought it was time for a promotion, I would look to the level above me and not even in a competitive way, but I would ask myself, is everything that they're doing, can I do it? And so when I was a coordinator, this job was supposed to be purely administrative. Like the job was made to stay there for 5 years. You were not supposed to move. You were supposed to book your cars, book the coffee, do all the grunt work, make the itineraries. Like it was very clear. But I was like, no,
Mm,
so but I said, this is the job. I need to do well at the job. And so I did. I booked the cars, I got the coffee. There wasn't a mistake I was making in terms of my basic job. And then once I had done that, I like looked over and I was like, what do I need to get out of this role? I looked at the role above me, a junior publicist, and she was writing press releases. She was writing bios. I didn't know how to do that. And so one day I overheard her being like, I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. And I said, hey, if you need any help with those bios, I could write a first draft for you and send those to you. And she was like, why? And I was like, oh, just to help, just to help. But I knew that I wasn't a good writer. I needed to practice. And so she gave me that work. I wrote her bios. I sent them to her. She gave me edits. I wrote them again, sent them to her. And what happened the next time? She said, hey, Imani, do you want to write my bios? Now, this might seem like, girl, why would you volunteer for extra work? But I just had to be realistic. They weren't going to promote me to a publicist if I couldn't write. And so sometimes I think we have to be honest with where we need to improve and seek out that opportunity so that you can be ready for promotion. So I was writing her bios. Then I graduated. She let me start writing her press releases. People will give you some work. So I'm writing her press releases now. And then she got sick one day and she goes, oh, Monty, can you the Real Housewives of Atlanta, can you go with them to the Wendy Williams show? I'm sick. I said, yeah.
Yeah.
So I ran down and I'm a coordinator, but I go there with my blazer and the housewife is like, who are you? And I'm Imani. And I took her through the day. And so I kind of like created this like opening that did not exist because I'm like, you're not going to pigeonhole me in this role. I'm sure there's a lot of people, no problem. They would go to work, they would do their work, they would go home, they would come to work, they would do their work. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was like, I can't do this forever. And so I did that at every level. So I got promoted. And as soon as I got to junior publicist, I looked up at what the publicist was doing. And I noticed that in meetings, at every meeting, she gave an update. And I said, hmm. And so I just started emulating what people more senior than me were doing and also staying true to myself. And when it came time to promotion, there's three things that you want to know. The first thing is you need regular visibility with your manager. So if you don't have a weekly with them, you need to put a weekly on their calendar. If you are like, well, what do we talk about? It's an update of what you're working on because your manager is so busy. You might think they're looking over at every little thing that you're doing, but they're reporting to their manager. And so you want to get some time on their calendar and go through all the things you're doing. So by the time promotion time comes, they're not like, well, what were you doing all year? And you were working. The second thing is that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So I'm from the South where you are quiet and you come when you are called and you are not loud. You are a nice Southern lady. That does not work in the big city. And I learned that very quickly because I saw that I would just do my work, go into my cubicle, do all this work, but I never really talked about it because it was my job. I'm like, I'm getting paid to do this. And what I saw around me is that the girls who got their spreads and went into the boss's office and showed it to them, they were getting promoted. And so you want to be able, again, even if you're faking it till you make it, in your one-on-one, you want to say, oh, I wanted to share this. You want to talk about your wins out loud. And then the third thing to get ready for a promotion is when your end of year review comes up, if you've looked and you're killing it, everything above you, you're doing it. Ladies, I know it's awkward, but you have to say as one of your goals that you'd like to be promoted. You cannot insinuate it. You cannot hint it. You have to say it. I did not know this rule, but my colleague pulled me into her office and she said, you have to say it and make that intention. And if they say, oh, you're not ready yet, say, okay, I totally hear you. What could I do to get ready then? And I know that's awkward, like feedback, but you need it. You need it. And I'll tell you this last cringe story, you all. I came from this, I was really rough around the edges when I started working. And when I was at NBC and I was a coordinator, I was so happy to be there. I would skip down the halls. I'm not even kidding. Like they gave me free coffee, free breakfast. I watched TV all day. I didn't work. I was like, this is a cool job. I would skip down the halls. And one day my boss, Jen, said, Imani, come here. I said, oh, okay. She said, shut the door. I'm like, okay. She said, if you're going to grow at this company, you need to have executive presence. You cannot be skipping down the hall. No one is going to take you seriously. Now, listen, I could have been all up in my feelings, like, she doesn't like me, like, but I was like, yo, she just put me on right now, because she didn't have to say anything. She could have been like laughing behind my back. She just put me on. So when people give you feedback, again, I'm not talking about bullies, I'm not talking about passive aggressive, but when people give you constructive feedback, find the maturity to say, what about this is helpful to me? And what about this do I like not need? And if you can find the difference, so many years of stress will be cut out of your life, because if I hadn't had the right mindset, I would have been like, she's such a hater. What's
Mm.
wrong with skipping? You know?
I agree. I agree. Like, don't criticize me.
I
I'm
love it now. I love it. I'm like, what could be better? Tell me. Because I don't want to walk around with like egg on my face. And I could have been better.
I'd rather you tell me privately than everybody, laughing in my face. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one last question before audience questions. I have to ask. In hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently when starting your brand?
Ooh. Is there anything I would have done differently? I think I would have been, I mean, it worked, but I think I would have been a little bit more confident. I think in the beginning, there were a lot of people that were like, why, like, again, like this, like, why do you need a community? And it sounds so crazy now, but a lot of people were like, this is not like, this isn't going to go anywhere. And I didn't have the discernment. It went straight to my heart. I didn't have the confidence to be like, trust yourself, trust your abilities. I think I was able to start producing receipts and I could look back and be like, oh, God's got me. But in the beginning, it was really discouraging to me. And again, it worked for me because having a chip on my shoulder, like I thrive in that environment, but I definitely internalized a lot of the feedback of like, this is never going to work. Like I remember when I went from, we went from 800 people, and then we needed a bigger venue, and something in me was like, you should do a venue that fits 3,000 people. And I was like, okay. And so I went and found this venue and I signed the contract. And I remember calling one of my mentors and I was so excited. And she was like, wait, what did you do? And I was like, I just signed a venue for 3,000 people. And she's like, well, how many did you have last year? And I said, 800 people. And she said, oh, Imani, you've made a terrible mistake. How are you going to get 3,000 people? And I went home and almost passed out. Like I had signed the contract. And so there was no part of me that was like, she's wrong. I completely was like, I've made a terrible mistake. Right. And now I'm able to know the difference between what people think I can do and what God thinks I can do. Those are different things. And so when I was younger, if somebody told me I couldn't do things for a second, I was like, they're right. Now I know they just didn't have the vision that God had put on my heart, but I did not know that then.
Come on. Come on. Because my pastor said people can only give you advice from their worldview.
Right. And if they haven't been there, they might not even be trying to sabotage you. They just might not see it.
Scared. Yeah, they're scared.
Yeah, they're like, I've never done that. So like I just can't see it. But yeah, I agree with your pastor.
Okay. All right, we have audience questions. So, um, let's see. Ebony Smith, are you able to select the gender ethnicity of the mentor on Score Mentor?
This is a great question. Now I'm gonna say something controversial. Okay. We've got to get out of this mindset that mentors have to look like us. I actually think you need diversity in mentors. So the reason that I said that Mr. Bob is a 65 white-year-old man, I was specific in that because you want to diversify your information. The world is not just Black people. I love Black people, but you want to not put yourself in a place where you can only interact with a certain group of people. There might be a preference. There might be a, this is where I feel at home, but the world is full with all types of people. And what you'll end up finding is the same way that you need diversity on your team of thought, you need diversity in mentorship. So I very strongly recommend having different mentors because Mr. Bob stretched my mind in a way to think bigger, right? He was like, you're thinking about CultureCon as a 1-year event. CultureCon is a platform. It's not an event, it's a platform. You need to be thinking about how you can service your community all year round with jobs and resources. It's not just one event. You're thinking too small. I had never had someone tell me you're thinking too small. I said, "Oh, no, Bob." But he challenged me. And so I don't know if score might have that, but I do challenge you all to like think about finding mentors in a variety of places. They don't have to just be in your industry. They don't have to be your same gender or even ethnicity, because as you're creating things, you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position where even if you don't take all of their advice, you have different advice to pull from. So I hope that's helpful, but I have Black women, Black men, white women, white men. The person who advocated for me the most at NBC, the person who got me 8 promotions, is a white Jewish woman.
Wow.
Okay? A white Jewish woman. So I'm just putting that out there that you got to go where the heart posture is right. You got to make sure that the discernment and the heart posture is there, because you'll be like, okay, they look like me. And maybe it's not always the vibes that you were hoping for. So just keep an open mind and an open heart. But it's totally fine to kind of feel like this is what I lean towards, but just be open to what mentorship could look like.
Hmm. All right, next question. What would you say to someone who knows their plans, knows their skills, but is scared to take that leap?
I completely, I mean, I was her. You know what I think about whenever I'm afraid to take a leap, you know what I do? I go to Wikipedia
Hmm.
and I read people's stories, and it helps me continue my story. Sorry, one second. It helps me continue my story because, you know, we sometimes think if I leave, it's the end of the world, but a lot of times, it's just the beginning. And I think for me, a lot of times I'm like, okay, what's the, like, if I just stay here forever and I never do anything, would I be okay with that? Like, is that my story? And you think about it, I think we're like, oh, I just won't do anything today. But today turns into tomorrow, and then it's 2 years, and now you're 86. So just do it. And I think, you know what? I think we all think about the audience. What if I fail? Who's gonna see it? And da 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 da. Who cares? And I know that's easier said than done, but like people are paying attention to you a lot less than you think. So you might as well just do it. That's just what I would say, but I completely feel you, Ebony, because I very much was like, I remember when I had to put Creative Collective in my bio, I was like, cringe,
That was me with Network All Black last week because I just put it
cringe.
on LinkedIn.
But if I'll tell you what, if you don't believe it, no one else will believe it. That's why you got to be a little delulu. It's like what I like to do, especially now with reels and stuff and content. I post it, then I just put my phone down
Mm.
and go eat my breakfast. So yeah, I wish you whatever, Ebony, whatever you're looking to do, just start and make your goals tangible. So don't go from 0 to 100. Maybe it's like today I'm going to brainstorm a name for my business.
Mm.
Next week I'm going to see if it's available on Instagram. The following week I'm going to figure out the 3 things we're going to offer. Like give yourself baby steps versus I'm going to launch a business next month. Like that's a lot.
I agree. Kiera Moore says, Hi, Imani. Thank you for your insight and sharing your story. Would you suggest CultureCon as an ideal conference for recent graduates? And what type of preparation would you suggest?
Absolutely. I wish I had CultureCon when I was in college. I didn't know all these different careers existed. And it wasn't until a publicist came to Vanderbilt that I was like, what's a publicist? I didn't know it was real. But yes, one, CultureCon is free for students while supplies last. So like don't miss your blessing. Get that free student ticket. And two, it really helps you build community, both networking across with other students, but also networking up. You might be in line for a food truck, compliment, a young lady on her sweater just to find out she works at Rock Nation. Now you guys are getting coffee and you're learning about working at Rock Nation. So I would absolutely suggest you come. There's so much good energy there. And I think, like we talked about, so your life can change with networking. Your whole life can change because, wait, I didn't even tell you guys how I got my job at, I have to tell you really quick how I got my job at NBC. Really, really quick. I was in the page program and we went to these like informationals. They were just like, here's how to be a lawyer, here's how to be an agent. There was one like, here's how to work in HR. And I remember all my friends were like, I'm not going to that. And I said, I'm going to all of them. There were like 8 of us in this room. Here's how to work in HR. And he gave his spiel. It was okay. And at the end, he said, I'm the hiring manager for Bravo. In fact, I'm trying to find a coordinator to join their team. And God said, and
That's
I was like, I said, wait, I'd love to apply to be a coordinator. And he said, okay, great. Do you have a resume? And I said, I do. And he said, great, you have an interview tomorrow. And that's
was
how I
God.
got my job. I just showed up and met someone who was hiring for the position. So to answer your question, yes, come to CultureCon, meet amazing people, and build your network so that you can, live the life that you've always imagined.
One more. Do you have any advice for getting into a new industry and not really knowing anyone? So pivoting careers?
Yeah. I think, what you can do is, leaning even back into discovery, especially in the day of the internet, is there's so much research you can do. So let's say right now you're working in finance, but you really want to work in sports, right? Like I always love like digital mentors. So I would start following people on Instagram who have the career that I would like to have. And I look at their stories. What are they reading? What podcast do they listen to? Like, just start studying them, not stalk them, but studying them. And what you can start doing is like putting yourself in position to learn more about that industry. And what you'll find is most skills are transferable. So before I became a publicist, I thought I wanted to be an agent. So my whole resume was like agent, talent, agent, talent. It had no publicity. But I was like, I need to be a publicist. And so I took that resume and I updated the skills to be transferable. So instead of it saying like only things that I did with talent, I also plussed up all the writing that I did for the talent. I wrote their bios, I wrote their one sheets. These were all things that I could use in publicity. So take a look at your resume and see, are there any transferable things? And if you land the interview, get ahead of them and say, this is what I said, I know my resume primarily, is in talent, but I have a strong interest in storytelling and writing, and there's a ton of transferable skills that I could bring from wanting to be an agent to being a very strong publicist. So before she could even tell me that was my weakness, I already owned it and told her, oh, I already know, and this is how I'm going to use this to do that.
Love that. Love, love that. Love that. Basically, tell them what you already know so they don't have to tell you.
That right. Don't be surprised about yourself, right? Like don't lie to yourself. So I was like, I already know what you're gonna say. Let me get ahead of that.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Imani, for being here, for dropping all of these gems. I'm going to check out the score. What is it? Scorementor.org.
Yes, I think so. And if you guys want, you can just Google Score Mentor and it'll come up. And it's like dating. You can, if the first person doesn't work out, just book it with another person. You don't have to force it.
All right. All right. Thank you so, so much. I really enjoyed our chat. All right. Shout out to Gwinnett. You feel me? So
Absolutely. We're out here. Thank you so much for everything and for the platform you've built. So incredible.
thank you. Thank you. I will be at CultureCon this year. So
Yeah.
yes. All right. Thank you all. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.